3 days before Thanksgiving, my phone rang while I was pouring my morning coffee into the same old mug my late wife had given me. "Dad, don't come this year," my son said flatly. "You'll just embarrass us. Standing next to my wife's family, people will think you're the chauffeur." I quietly hung up, bought my grandson's gift anyway, and spent Thanksgiving serving dinner at an orphanage instead. Just after sunset, driving home through a cold rainstorm, I saw flashing lights, and within 1 hour the same son who rejected me was staring at me on every TV screen. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Before we dive in, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment telling me how you're feeling today in one word. This space is better when you're in it. Just so you know, some details have been fictionalized to highlight the lesson. What matters most is the message it carries. The phone rang at 7:15 on a Monday morning in November, 3 days before Thanksgiving, and I made the mistake of answering it. I had been awake since 6:30. That is what retirement does to a man who spent 35 years reporting to job sites. By dawn, your body stops caring that you no longer have anywhere urgent to be. I was 65 years old, living alone in a small paid-off house in Scranton, surviving on a $2,800 monthly pension and the quiet pride of having built 12 federal bridges that never fell. The kitchen was warm. The coffee was fresh. A single cardinal sat at the bird feeder outside my window, picking at seeds I had refilled the evening before. On my refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a miniature hard hat, was my volunteer schedule for St. Anthony's Orphanage Thursdays, 2 to 5 p.m. I had been going there for 6 months. It was something to do. Something that felt useful in a life that had become very quiet since my wife Margaret passed 4 years ago, and my son stopped calling except on obligatory holidays. I was expecting Sterling's call that morning. We always confirmed Thanksgiving plans the Monday before. Last year he had hosted at his place in Philadelphia prime ribcloth napkins, his wife Valentina's forced smile across the table. This year I assumed it would be the same. Maybe I would bring a pie. Maybe my grandson Finn would actually look up from his tablet long enough to say hello. The phone sat on the kitchen counter, black and ordinary. The same landline I had kept, because cell reception in this part of Scranton could be unpredictable. When it rang, I set down my coffee mug, plain white ceramic, no logo, the kind you buy in a 4-pack at the hardware store, and picked up the receiver. "Hello, Dad," Sterling's voice. 37 years old, running a boutique management consulting firm in Philadelphia's business district, building his personal brand as a family values leader on LinkedIn while his actual family crumbled. No greeting. No asking how I was. Just my title delivered like the opening line of a business email. "Morning, son," I said. "I was just thinking about Thanksgiving. What time do you want me?" Dad, this year we're doing Thanksgiving at my father-in-law's estate in mainline Philadelphia." I paused. Gordon Prescott. Valentina's father. Litigation attorney with a name on the door and a driveway longer than my entire street. I had met him twice. Both times he had looked at my flannel shirt the way you look at something tracked in on someone's shoe. "All right," I said slowly. "What time should I?" The guest list is packed: lawyers, executives, local politicians, very high profile. There was a strange weight to the way he said high profile, like he was explaining something to someone who did not understand the concept. I waited. Sterling kept talking. "If you stand next to my father-in-law wearing that flannel shirt, people will think you're his driver." I stopped breathing. "Just don't come." How long does it take for a phone call to dismantle 37 years of fatherhood? 4 minutes. Maybe less. I do not know exactly because I was not watching the clock. I was watching the cardinal outside my window fly away. "Sterling," I said quietly. "Are you telling me not to come to Thanksgiving because of how I dress?" "I'm telling you not to come because it's not a good fit. You wouldn't be comfortable there anyway. All anyone talks about is corporate law and portfolio management. You'd be bored. His voice was so calm, so reasonable, like he was doing me a favor, protecting me from an event I was too simple to navigate. I see, I said. There was a pause. I think he expected me to argue, to get angry, to give him an excuse to hang up with moral high ground. But I had spent 3.5 decades engineering structures that bore the weight of tens of thousands of vehicles every single day. I knew how to stay calm under pressure that would crack other men in half. Look, Dad, I have a meeting in 10 minutes. I'll call you next week. All right. Take care. The line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone for longer than I needed to. Then I set the receiver back in its cradle with the same precision I used to mark elevation points on a blueprint. My coffee mug sat on the counter, still steaming. The Cardinal was gone. The volunteer schedule was still on the refrigerator. Nothing in the room had changed, but everything in it felt different. I had taught my son to ride a bicycle in a church parking lot in 1994. I remembered the exact day, October 15th, overcast sky, his training wheels sitting in the back of my truck because he had begged me to take them off. He fell 6 times. I picked him up 6 times. When he finally made it across the lot without falling, he looked back at me with a smile so wide I thought his face might break. Now he could not let me sit at his table because I might embarrass him in front of lawyers. I turned to the sink and washed my coffee mug. Hot water, dish soap. Slow, methodical circles with the sponge. I dried it with a towel and set it in the cabinet. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the end of my street, where you could just see the edge of the small bridge crossing Roaring Brook. I had designed that bridge in 1998. It was still standing. It would be standing long after I was gone. I stood there in my kitchen, the same flannel shirt I had worn while designing the Lackawanna Avenue Bridge, the same steady hands that had kept 12 federal structures from collapsing, and realized my son thought I looked like someone's driver. The coffee was still hot. I drank the rest of it. The next morning I went shopping anyway. Tuesday arrived with cold gray light and no phone calls. I ate breakfast at the same kitchen table where I had taken Sterling's call the day before, drank coffee from the same white mug, and tried not to think about what Thanksgiving would look like without me. Then I got in my truck and drove to the department store on Lackawanna Avenue. The toy section was bright and loud with primary colors. Families moved through the aisles, parents steering carts, while children pointed at boxes. I stood in front of the Lego display for 12 minutes, reading the backs of sets designed for ages 8 to 14. My grandson Finn was 8. He liked to build things. At least he used to back when I saw him more than twice a year. I picked the Technic set. Heavy box, complicated gears, a crane that actually moved if you assembled it correctly. $67. More than I usually spent on anything that was not groceries or utilities. I added a children's book about bridge engineering, hardcover full-color diagrams, showing suspension cables and load distribution. Another $23. The cashier was young, maybe 19, with a name tag that said Jessica. She scanned the items without looking at me. "Gift receipt?" she asked. "No," I said. "That's all right." I drove home and wrapped both items at my kitchen table. Brown paper, nothing fancy. I have never been good at making packages look like the ones in catalogs, but I know how to fold corners tight and tape edges so they hold. I wrote Finn's name on a card in block letters, the same style I used on blueprints for 35 years. Clear, legible, no room for misinterpretation. By 2 o'clock, I was on the road to Philadelphia. Light drizzle. windshield wipers on the lowest setting. The drive took an hour and 40 minutes longer than usual because of an accident near Wilkes Barre that backed traffic up for 3 miles. I did not mind. I was not in a hurry. Sterling's neighborhood looked like a painting. Wide streets, trees planted at exact intervals, houses with columns and circular driveways. I pulled up to his address, a brick colonial with black shutters and a front lawn that someone was definitely paying to maintain. His car was not in the driveway, Valentina's either. They were probably already at her father's estate setting tables for the lawyers and executives and local politicians. I got out of the truck, walked up the stone path, and set the wrapped package on the front step. No knock, no note. Just the gift and the card with Finn's name. Then I walked back to my truck, started the engine, and drove to a gas station 2 miles away. I sat there for 20 minutes with the engine off, looking through the wet windshield at the city where my son had built his life. Philadelphia looked like a place where people wore the right kind of shirts and knew the right kind of people. It looked like a painting I was never invited into. I did not know if my son ever saw that gift. I did not know if my grandson ever got to open it. Some questions, when you are old enough, you stop asking. I drove back to Scranton and slept poorly. Thanksgiving morning came. No phone calls, no text messages. I checked twice to make sure my phone was working. It was. I stood in my kitchen at 8:47 a.m. on a national holiday drinking coffee, in the same flannel shirt my son was ashamed of, and realized I had nowhere I was supposed to be. Then I remembered the orphanage. St. Anthony's was hosting a small Thanksgiving meal for the kids who had nowhere else to go. I had seen the flyer on the bulletin board during my last volunteer shift. They needed help setting up tables, serving food, cleaning up afterward. I got in my truck and drove over. The building smelled like roasted turkey and industrial floor cleaner. A woman named Carol was setting up folding chairs in the big hall. She looked surprised to see me. "Alfred," she said, "I didn't know you were coming today." "I had some free time," I said. I spent the next 9 hours there. Set up 8 long tables with white plastic tablecloths. Fixed a broken space heater in the corner using a screwdriver and electrical tape. The thermostat connection had come loose. Simple fix if you knew what you were looking for. Served mashed potatoes to 42 children who had never met me before and did not care what kind of shirt I wore. Around 3 in the afternoon, a group of boys asked me what I used to do for work. I told them I was a bridge engineer. One of them, maybe 9 years old, missing a front tooth, looked up at me with wide eyes. "Mr. Thornton, how do bridges stay up in the wind?" I knelt down so I was at his level. "Well, kiddo," I said, "it's all about understanding the forces trying to knock them down." I spent 20 minutes drawing diagrams on a napkin, showing them how tension and compression worked, how cables distributed weight, how you could build something strong enough to hold 10,000 tons if you understood the math. They listened like it was the most interesting thing they had ever heard. No one interrupted. No one checked a phone. No one looked at me like I was someone's driver. What does a man do when his own family decides he is not good enough to share their table? He finds a different table. He finds people who do not measure him by his shirt or his address, or whether he knows the right lawyers. He finds a place where his presence is not an embarrassment. I left the orphanage at 6 p.m. The rain had started, heavy, cold November rain that turned the roads dark and slick. I thanked Carol, pulled on my raincoat, and walked to my truck in the parking lot. My phone sat in the cup holder. 0 missed calls, 0 messages, not a single word from Philadelphia. I started the engine and headed toward Route 6. The road back to Scranton was almost empty. Most people were home with their families, eating pie, watching football, arguing about politics in warm living rooms. I drove slowly. The rain hammered against the windshield. The wipers struggled to keep up. I was not in a hurry. No one was waiting for me at home anyway. That was when I saw the flashing lights in the distance. I pulled over immediately. The flashing lights cut through the rain in weak, irregular pulses. Red, then amber, then nothing, then red again. I eased my truck onto the shoulder about 50 yards back from whatever was ahead, turned on my hazards and grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight from the glove box. Through the windshield, I could see the dark outline of something large and wrong tilted at an angle that did not belong on a straight section of highway. I stepped out into the rain. It was heavier than it had been when I left the orphanage cold, driving the kind that soaks through a coat in seconds. The pavement was slick. I moved carefully, sweeping the flashlight beam ahead of me. That was when I saw it. A school bus. 35 seats, yellow paint streaked with mud, the words Riverside Elementary still visible along the side. The front end had slid off the road into a steep ditch, dragged there by what looked like a mudslide from the hillside above. The entire vehicle sat at a 30-degree angle, nose down, rear wheels still on pavement, but the front buried in thick, dark earth. Hazard lights blinked weakly through the rain. The windshield wipers were still moving. Someone was inside. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 as I moved toward the bus. My boots sank into mud that came up past my ankles. The operator answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? School bus off Route 6, mile marker 47, mudslide, children inside, send everything. I did not wait for her to ask clarifying questions. I shoved the phone into my pocket and kept moving. Behind me in the bed of my truck, I kept a set of emergency towing cables, 20 feet of braided steel rated for 8,000 pounds. I grabbed them and a second flashlight, then made my way to the bus. The exterior was slick with rain and mud. I climbed onto the rear bumper, then onto the back panel using the emergency exit handle for leverage. The metal was cold and wet under my hands. I could hear voices inside, children's voices, high and frightened, some crying. I pulled the emergency door release. It resisted for a moment, then gave way with a hiss of compressed air. The door swung open. The first thing I saw was the children. 22 of them, maybe third and fourth graders, packed into seats that now tilted at an angle that made sitting feel like falling. Some clutched the seat backs in front of them. Others held on to each other. A few were crying. Most just looked terrified. The second thing I saw was the woman. She sat in the aisle near the middle of the bus. White hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a wool cardigan over a flannel shirt not unlike my own. Lorraine Whitfield, I would learn later, 62 years old, a retired elementary school teacher who volunteered her time taking kids on field trips. She sat cross-legged on the tilted floor, a picture book open in her lap, and she was telling a story in the calmest, most authoritative voice I had ever heard. And the third little pig said, "Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin." She read as if she were sitting in a library and not a bus slowly sinking into a mudslide. Every child in that bus was listening to her. I stepped inside, water dripping from my coat onto the rubber floor mats. "I am Alfred," I said. "Help is coming." The relief that spread through the bus was immediate. You could see it in the way shoulders relaxed, in the way some of the crying stopped. Lorraine looked up at me, closed the book, and nodded once. "Weldon," she said, "this gentleman is here to help us. Keep listening to my story." She opened the book again and continued reading as if nothing had changed. 35 years building bridges teaches you one thing in a crisis. People do not need your fear, they need your calm. I moved toward the front of the bus, steadying myself against the seatbacks as I walked. The driver sat rigid behind the wheel, a man in his 40s with a Riverside Elementary ID badge clipped to his jacket. Tom Brennan. I would learn later he had been driving school buses for 20 years and had never been in an accident before tonight. "Driver," I said quietly. "Anyone injured?" He shook his head without letting go of the wheel. All accounted for, he said, voice tight. 22 kids, one teacher me. Thanksgiving field trip to Noxon Farm. We were heading back when the hillside gave way. I looked through the windshield. The front wheels were buried at least 4 feet deep in mud. The ditch dropped another 6 feet below that. If the bus slid any farther forward, the entire vehicle would roll. How long have you been here? I asked. Adi, maybe 10 minutes. I called 911 right after we stopped moving. I nodded. Emergency response time out here was usually 20 minutes minimum longer in weather like this. We had time. Not much, but enough. I moved back toward the emergency exit, passing Lorraine and the children. She was still reading. Some of the kids had stopped crying entirely. A few were even smiling at the part where the wolf fell down the chimney into the pot of boiling water. I stepped out onto the back of the bus into the rain and pulled out my phone to update the 911 dispatcher. That was when I noticed something. The bus had shifted. Not much. Maybe half an inch. But I had been trained to notice when structures moved even slightly. I knelt down on the back panel, shined my flashlight beneath the chassis. The mud was not static. It was flowing slowly, almost imperceptibly, but definitely flowing. The rain was feeding it, turning the hillside into a slow river of earth that was pushing everything downward. The front wheels were not just stuck. They were sinking. The bus was not staying still. I looked beneath the chassis again, tracking the angle of the mud flow with the precision I used to use for calculating load distribution on bridge foundations. The math was simple and terrible. If the rain kept up at this rate, the mud would continue flowing. The bus would continue sinking. Millimeter by millimeter, the front end was sliding deeper into the earth. I did not wait for the sirens. The bus was sinking. Emergency responders were 20 minutes out. Those children had maybe 15 minutes before the rear exit became inaccessible. I climbed back onto the bus. Tom Brennan was still gripping the wheel. I put a hand on his shoulder. Tom, you take the front 3. I'll get the back 5, youngest first. He nodded and let go of the wheel. We moved fast. 8 children in that first group, preschool and first grade. I lifted them one at a time, passed them to Tom at the emergency exit, who handed them to motorists gathering at the roadside. The children were crying, shaking, soaked through. But they were out. The bus groaned beneath us, a deep metallic sound from the chassis. Halfway through the 8th child, I felt it shift 2 inches, maybe less. Moved, I said. We got the last one out and stepped back onto the road. My boots were caked in mud. My hands were scraped and bleeding from wet metal. I did not care. Second group, I said. Lorraine was already organizing them. 12 third and fourth graders lined up in the tilted aisle. She moved through them with calm efficiency, touching shoulders, murmuring reassurances, passing them forward one by one. I stood at the rear exit and lifted each child down. Hands reached up from below strangers, pulling children to safety. Lorraine handed me the last one, a girl with fogged glasses, and started to climb out herself. That's everyone, she said. Good, I said. Let's get you out too. The bus groaned again. Another inch. Lorraine stepped down onto the road and looked back. Thank you, she said quietly. I turned to walk toward my truck. That was when I heard it. Tapping, faint, rhythmic, desperate. Coming from inside the bus. I froze. Tom, I called. How many kids were on this bus? He looked up confused. 22. Why? I counted the children on the roadside. 21. I climbed back onto the bus. The tapping came from the very rear beneath a flipped seat. I crawled toward it, the floor slick with mud. The bus shifted beneath me. I ignored it. Hello, I called. The tapping stopped. Then a small voice. Help. I pulled myself to the back row and looked beneath the overturned seat. A boy, 8 years old, small for his age, dark hair matted by rain and mud. His left leg was pinned under the seat mechanism. He had been tapping with his free hand against the metal frame. Finn Hayes. I would learn his name later. "Hold still, kiddo," I said. "I'm going to get you out." 35 years of structural engineering taught me to calculate load-bearing limits in seconds. I had never calculated how much weight an 8-year-old's fear could carry. I lay flat and examined the seat mechanism. The bolt had sheared when the seat flipped, jamming the frame against his shin. If I pulled wrong, I could break his leg. If I pulled right, I could free him in one motion. I braced my feet, gripped the frame with both hands, and lifted. The metal resisted, then gave way with a screech. The boy's leg came free. I pulled him toward me, checked his ankle, his knee. "Can you wiggle your toes for me?" He wiggled them. "Good. You're okay now. You're safe." I picked him up and carried him toward the rear exit. The bus groaned a sound like tearing metal. I did not look back. I just moved. We cleared the exit with maybe 30 seconds to spare. Behind us, the bus slid another 6 inches. The rear exit was now half buried. If I had waited any longer, we would not have made it out. I set the boy down on the road shoulder. He sat beside me without speaking, shivering in his wet coat. Then he reached out and placed his small, cold hand over my scraped, bleeding hand. He did not say thank you. He did not need to. Lorraine appeared with a blanket and wrapped it around him. "Last one?" she asked. I nodded. By the time the ambulances arrived, all 22 children were accounted for. The paramedics checked vitals, handed out blankets, loaded 2 kids with minor injuries. One paramedic insisted on bandaging my forearm while I sat on the ambulance bumper. That was when the reporter showed up. Jessica Reeves. WNEP-TV, late 30s, professional demeanor, sharpened by years of chasing human interest stories through northeastern Pennsylvania. She approached through the flashing emergency lights with a cameraman in tow. "Sir," she said, "can you tell us what happened here tonight?" I told her. "School bus mudslide, 22 children, everyone safe." She asked more questions. "How did you know what to do? Were you scared? What made you stop?" I answered each one calmly. Facts. No drama. Then she asked the question, "Is your family waiting for you at home tonight to celebrate?" I looked directly into the camera lens. 1 second. Maybe 2. I smiled, faint, tired, devoid of joy. "No," I said. "My son told me I was too poor, that I shouldn't show up next to his wife's family." The reporter froze. The cameraman did not. The red light stayed on. I did not know the camera was still running. I offered no explanation, no context, no defense. Just the truth delivered in the same flat tone I used to report structural measurements. Jessica stared at me for a long moment. Then she silently signaled to cut the camera. I did not know what she was going to do with that footage. To be honest, at that moment, I did not care. I got home a little after 9:30. The house was dark and cold. I had left in the early afternoon for the orphanage before the temperature dropped and the rain started. Now the windows were frosted at the edges, and my breath came out in clouds when I exhaled. I turned on the heat, hung my wet coat on the hook by the door, and walked straight to the shower. The hot water felt like a small mercy. I stood under it for longer than necessary, watching mud and dried blood circle the drain. My hands were scraped raw from climbing on wet metal. My shoulders ached from lifting children. I was 65 years old and had just spent 2 hours pulling 22 kids out of a sinking school bus. I should have felt something, pride maybe, or relief. Instead, I just felt empty. I dried off, put on clean clothes, and went to the kitchen to brew tea. That was when I noticed my phone. 15 missed calls. 38 text messages. The screen lit up again as I picked it up, another call from a number I did not recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. Then another. Former PennDOT colleagues. Neighbors I had not spoken to in months. Numbers with Philadelphia area codes. I did not answer any of them. I just set the phone on the counter and turned on the television while the kettle boiled. WNEP was broadcasting the late-night news. The anchor was a young woman with perfect hair and a practiced expression of concern. Behind her on the screen was a still image from earlier tonight. A tilted school bus, emergency lights, and me sitting on the back of an ambulance with a bandage on my arm. The hero of Route 6, the anchor said. A retired bridge engineer who saved 22 children from a mudslide tonight has a story you need to hear. Then they played the interview. Uncut. Every word. I watched myself on television exhausted and covered in mud, telling Jessica Reeves that my son thought I was too poor to sit at his table. The camera had caught everything, the faint smile, the tired eyes, the flat delivery of a truth I had not planned to share with anyone, let alone the entire northeastern Pennsylvania viewing area. I turned off the television. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from LinkedIn. Someone had tagged me in a post. I opened the app. The post was from Sterling. It had been published 43 minutes ago, time-stamped 8:47 p.m., around the time I was still at the mudslide scene watching paramedics load the last of the children into ambulances. The post was short, professional, perfectly crafted to sound reasonable. My father has always enjoyed playing the victim. Tonight is no different. Below it, a paragraph about family privacy, the pain of estrangement, the importance of not rushing to judgment based on incomplete narratives. All the right words, all the right tone. Posted from his expensive phone at his father-in-law's lavish Thanksgiving dinner table while I was pulling his grandson's classmates out of the mud. I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the counter, poured my tea, and went to bed. I slept poorly. Friday morning came with pale gray light and more missed calls. I ignored them and made coffee. Then I checked my phone. Sterling's LinkedIn post had exploded overnight. Thousands of comments. Most of them were not kind. Someone had found dashcam footage from one of the responding ambulances, grainy time-stamped video showing me climbing back onto the tilted bus for the third time, while emergency lights flashed in the background. The timestamp read 7:14 p.m. Someone else had posted a video recorded by one of the motorists who stopped to help. It showed me carrying the last child out of the bus 30 seconds before it slid another 6 inches into the mud. That timestamp read 7:18 p.m. Sterling had posted his attack at 8:47 p.m. while I was still on scene, while paramedics were still bandaging my arm, while his son's classmates were still being loaded into ambulances. The comparison needed no commentary. How many times can you watch your own child destroy himself before you stop feeling anything at all? By mid-morning, Sterling's post had been shared tens of thousands of times, not as support, but as evidence. Evidence of hubris. Evidence of a man so committed to his own image that he would smear his father on social media before the mud had even dried. His professional page was completely overrun. Every post, every article, every carefully curated piece of his personal brand buried under an avalanche of anger from strangers who had watched a 65-year-old man risk his life while Sterling typed corporate talking points from a dinner table in Philadelphia. I closed the app and finished my coffee. The call came around 2 in the afternoon. Bob Garrison, a former PennDOT engineer in his late 50s, who had worked alongside me for 15 years. Bob kept close tabs on the corporate sector and never hesitated to share bad news when it mattered. "Alfred," he said, "you see LinkedIn this morning." "Some of it," I said. Then you didn't see the new post. Meridian Healthcare just pulled out. They issued a public statement an hour ago." I said nothing. Bob kept talking. It's careful. They don't name Sterling directly. But everyone knows. The statement says, Meridian is committed to authentic family values, not performative ones. We are currently reviewing our partnerships with organizations whose leadership does not reflect these standards. I knew that contract. Sterling had spent 6 months courting Meridian, pitching his consulting firm as the embodiment of integrity and family-first leadership. The contract was worth $2.4 million annually. "Thank you for calling, Bob," I said. I hung up. I had spent 35 years building structures designed to hold weight under pressure. I had never taught my son how to do the same. I sat by the window for a long time after that. The rain from the night before had stopped hours ago. The streets of Scranton were dry and quiet. Snow was piled against the mailbox from an earlier dusting. A cardinal, maybe the same one from yesterday morning, sat at the feeder eating in peace. I imagined my son sitting in his office in Philadelphia, staring at a computer screen, watching the numbers vanish. Watching his carefully constructed empire crack and crumble because he could not stop himself from attacking the one person who had loved him unconditionally for 37 years. I did not feel victorious. I just felt very, very tired. The doorbell rang on Sunday afternoon, 6 days after Thanksgiving. I had spent most of the weekend alone, ignoring phone calls and letting the exhaustion settle into my bones. The viral footage had started to fade from the news cycle. My kitchen was quiet. The cardinal was back at the feeder. I was drinking tea and trying not to think about my son when the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Sterling stood on my porch, holding an expensive bouquet, roses and lilies, the kind you get from a proper florist, not a grocery store, and a white box from a high-end Philadelphia bakery. His face was flushed. His eyes were red and wet, tears already forming at the corners. The moment he saw me, he set the flowers and box down on the step and threw his arms around me. "Dad," he said, voice breaking, "I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong." I stood still. I did not hug him back. I just let him hold me, his grip tight and desperate, his breath coming in short gasps against my shoulder. Then I looked over his shoulder. Valentina was standing 2 steps back on the walkway. She was not looking at us. She was looking at her phone, holding it horizontally at chest level. Screen active. Recording. I gently stepped out of the embrace. "Are you filming this?" I asked. Valentina's face went pale. She lowered the phone. Sterling opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. No words came out. I walked past him into my house, grabbed my jacket from the rack by the door, and came back out. "Thank you for coming," I said. "I need to take a walk." I stepped past both of them down the porch steps and started walking. 3 blocks. I did not look back once. The neighborhood was quiet. Sunday afternoon in December. Most people were inside watching football or putting up Christmas decorations. I walked slowly, deliberately, focusing on the sound of my boots on the cold pavement. I did not think about my son standing on my porch with fake tears and a bakery box. I did not think about his wife holding a phone like a weapon. I just walked. When I returned 20 minutes later, their car was gone. The bouquet and the white pastry box were still sitting on the porch steps where Sterling had set them down. I picked up the box, brought it inside, and set it on the kitchen counter. I did not open it. When did my son learn to perform grief instead of feel it? Monday morning came cold and clear. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my phone. That was when I saw the post. Sterling had uploaded a photo to LinkedIn. It showed the 2 of us sitting at my kitchen table together, smiling. I was wearing my flannel shirt. He was wearing a navy sweater that probably cost more than my monthly pension. We looked like a father and son who had just reconciled after a painful estrangement. The caption read, "Family first, always." Below it, a long paragraph about reconciliation, about learning to communicate better, about being grateful for my strength and wisdom, about how difficult conversations lead to growth, about how family is worth fighting for. 847 likes in 6 hours. I stared at the photo. I remembered that day. Sunday afternoon. After I came back from my walk and found them gone, I had assumed that was the end of it. But apparently Sterling had come back. Or maybe he had never left. Maybe he had waited in the car while Valentina rang the doorbell again. And I had answered because I thought it might be a neighbor. No, wait. I scrolled back through my memory with the same precision I used to use for reviewing blueprints. Sunday afternoon. After the walk. I came home. The box was on the steps. I brought it inside. Then what? The doorbell rang again. I answered. Sterling was standing there alone this time, without Valentina, without the phone. Just him. Face less flushed. Eyes dry. "Dad," he said. "Can I come in just for a minute, please?" I let him in, not because I believed him, but because I was tired of fighting. He sat at my kitchen table. I made tea. We sat in silence for a while. He finished his cup, 11 minutes, I checked the clock, and then he said it. "Dad, let me finish this tea and let's take a quick photo." Valentina appeared from the hallway. She must have been waiting outside, or in the car, or maybe she had come in through the back. I did not know. I did not ask. She pulled out her camera. Sterling put his arm around my shoulders. I did not smile, but apparently the photo made it look like I did. Right after the photo, Sterling checked his phone. "I ordered an Uber," he said. "It'll be here in 3 minutes." He left. The Uber arrived. The driver knocked on my door, confused. "Your son said you'd pay the fare," he said. I paid $23. 11 minutes. Now sitting at my kitchen table on Monday morning, staring at the LinkedIn post with its 847 likes and its carefully crafted narrative about reconciliation and growth, I understood exactly what had happened. My son had come to my house with flowers and tears and a secretly recording phone to manufacture a viral moment of forgiveness. When I caught him, he pivoted, came back alone, sat for exactly 11 minutes, long enough to drink tea and take a photo, then left me with the Uber bill and walked away with content. 847 likes. I put my phone down on the counter. The white pastry box from yesterday sat beside the coffee maker, still unopened. I thought to myself, how many likes is 11 minutes worth? I drove down to Philadelphia on Tuesday to pick up my tools. The decision had nothing to do with my son, or his fake reconciliation photo, or the 847 people who had liked it. I needed my toolbox. I had left it in Sterling's garage months ago after repairing his furnace and winter was coming. I would need those tools. I sent a text Monday night, short, transactional. Need to pick up toolbox from garage, Tuesday afternoon work. His response came 12 minutes later. Tuesday afternoon works. Carol will let you in the garage. No apology. No acknowledgement of the photo or the 11 minutes or the Uber fare I had paid. Just logistics. I left Scranton at 1 o'clock. The drive took 2 hours through gray December cold. I did not listen to music. I did not call anyone. I just drove hands steady on the wheel the same way I had driven to work sites for 35 years. Sterling's house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac in one of those mainline neighborhoods where every lawn looked like it had been measured with a ruler. Stone walls, automated gates, driveways so clean you could eat off them. I pulled up and parked on the street, then walked up to the gate to wait. That was when I looked down. The asphalt was pristine. Smooth black surface, no cracks, no stains. But there near the edge where the driveway met the stone wall was a tiny shard of red plastic. I stared at it for a moment. Then I knelt down. It was small, maybe half the size of my thumbnail. I picked it up between my thumb and forefinger and turned it over in the afternoon light. It was a wheel piece. Technic Lego. The kind with the rubber tire that snaps onto the red rim. I recognized it immediately. because I had spent an hour in the toy aisle looking at those exact pieces before Thanksgiving. My heart sank. I looked closer at the edge of the driveway. There, swept into the corner where asphalt met stone, were more pieces. Yellow bricks, blue connectors, gray axles, all of them broken or cracked or shattered. All of them small enough to be missed by anyone who was not looking. But I was looking. I had spent an hour in that store choosing pieces I thought a boy would love. Someone had spent 30 seconds throwing them in the trash. The gift I had left on Sterling's doorstep before Thanksgiving, the Technic Lego, set the bridge engineering book, the brown paper wrapping the card, with Finn's name written in block letters, had not been opened with care. It had not been set aside to give to my grandson later. It had not been re-gifted to some other child who might appreciate it. It had been thrown away, crushed, discarded like garbage. I knelt there on the cold asphalt and picked up a few more pieces. A yellow 2x4 brick cracked down the middle. A blue gear one tooth snapped off. A gray pin bent at the end. I held them in my palm and felt the weight of what they represented. $67. That was what I had paid for the set. More than I usually spent on anything that was not groceries or utilities. More than I could comfortably afford on a pension. But it had been for my grandson. For Finn. For the boy I barely got to see anymore. And someone had thrown it away. I closed my fist around the single red wheel shard. The plastic edges cut into my palm. I did not care. The side door of the house opened. A woman stepped out, middle-aged, wearing a professional gray uniform, hair pulled back in a neat bun. Carol, the housekeeper. She did not make eye contact. She just pulled a small remote from her pocket and pressed a button. The garage door began to roll up with a mechanical hum. She nodded once. I nodded back. I stood up, slipped the red plastic piece into my coat pocket, and walked into the garage. My toolbox sat on a metal shelf where I had left it months ago, right next to a row of expensive power tools that still had price tags on them. I picked up my box, heavy, battered, older than my son, and walked back out. "Thank you," I said. Carol nodded again. She did not ask why I had been kneeling in the driveway. She did not ask if I needed anything else. She just waited for me to leave, then pressed the button again. The garage door rolled back down. I walked to my truck, set the toolbox in the bed, and climbed into the driver's seat. The red plastic shard was still in my coat pocket. I could feel it through the fabric, small, sharp, undeniable. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb. In my rearview mirror, I watched Sterling's house shrink and disappear. Pristine lawn, stone walls, automated gate, a place where broken plastic got swept into corners and forgotten. The drive back to Scranton took 2 hours. I did not turn on the radio. I did not stop for coffee. I just drove, one hand on the wheel, the other moving occasionally to my coat pocket to feel the sharp edges of the plastic piece through the fabric. I had built 12 bridges designed to carry weight without breaking. I had never learned how to build a heart that could do the same. By the time I pulled into my driveway in Scranton, it was dark. The Cardinal was gone from the feeder. The house was cold. I brought my toolbox inside, set it in the basement, and made tea. The red plastic piece stayed in my coat pocket. I did not take it out. I did not show it to anyone. I did not tell a soul what I had found. Some evidence you keep to yourself. Not because you are protecting anyone, but because some truths are too small and too sharp to share. Because once you say them out loud, you can never take them back. I sat at my kitchen table with my tea and thought about my grandson, 8 years old, probably wondering why his grandfather had not visited for Thanksgiving, probably not knowing there had been a gift at all. I drank my tea. I washed the mug. I went to bed. The red plastic piece stayed in my coat pocket. I was not sure I ever wanted to take it out. 2 days later, I was sitting on a low chair at St. Anthony's reading to a group of kids when the director walked in with someone I recognized. The red plastic piece was still in my coat pocket. I had not taken it out. I had not shown it to anyone. I carried it the way you carry a wound, close and quiet and private. But Thursday afternoon came and I had made a commitment. Thursdays 2 to 5. I read stories, helped with homework, fixed things that broke. It was routine. It was a place where no one cared about LinkedIn or viral videos or what my son thought of me. I was reading a book about a mouse who built a boat when Paul Hammond opened the playroom door. Paul was the facility director, early 50s, kind eyes, 2 decades of experience with grieving children. He stepped inside and held the door for someone behind him, Lorraine Whitfield, the white-haired woman from the bus. She wore a pale blue coat and carried a canvas bag. She looked around the room until her eyes found me. Paul waited until I finished the page. "Alfred," he said quietly, "there is a boy here who has been asking about you every single day since Thanksgiving." Lorraine stepped forward. "I had no idea you were on the news," she said. "I came because Finn wouldn't stop asking for you." Finn. Finn Hayes," Paul said. "The boy from the bus. He lives here." "Of course. The field trip. 22 children from St. Anthony's. Finn had been one of them. The last one pinned under the seat. "He's been asking for you," I said. "Every single day," Lorraine said. "Where is the grandpa who pulled me out? So I tracked you down through the volunteer coordinator." Paul gestured toward the far corner. There, sitting with a wooden puzzle, was Finn. Small for his age. Dark hair. The same boy I had pulled out with 30 seconds to spare. He looked up, saw me. His face changed. He ran across the room. Not to Lorraine, not to Paul. To me. He did not say a word. He just pressed himself tightly against my side, one small hand gripping my sleeve. I knelt down to his eye level. "You doing all right, kiddo?" I asked. He nodded, not scared anymore. He shook his head. I looked at him for a long moment. He looked back. No fear, no hesitation. Just a boy who had been asking for me every day for 2 weeks because I had pulled him out of a sinking bus and told him he was safe. My biological grandson had a crushed Lego set in a Philadelphia driveway. This boy wanted to know if he could call me Grandpa. Then Finn asked the question I was not prepared for. "When I grow up," he said softly, "can I call you Grandpa?" I stared at him. 8 years old, standing in an orphanage playroom in Scranton. He had absolutely no understanding of LinkedIn, no concept of mainline Philadelphia estates or automated gates, no idea what a corporate contract meant. He did not know about the 11-minute reconciliation, or the 847 likes, or the fake photo. He just knew I had pulled him out of the mud. I could not answer immediately. I sat there on the floor, surrounded by children and wooden puzzles, and I could not find words. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that he just gave you back something your own family threw away? My eyes welled up. For the first time since the phone call on November 21st. Since my son told me not to come to Thanksgiving because I would embarrass him, I felt tears. Not a loud sob, not a breakdown. Just quiet tears running down my face while I knelt on the floor with my hand on a boy's shoulder. I had built 12 bridges designed to carry weight without breaking. I had calculated load distribution and tension for 35 years. I had never learned how to build a heart that could hold this much at once. I placed my hand on Finn's shoulder. My voice came out rough. "Yeah," I said. "You can." Finn smiled. The kind of smile that does not understand how much it costs. The kind that just accepts a gift without questioning whether it is too much to ask for. He hugged me. I hugged him back. Lorraine watched from across the room. She did not interrupt. She did not take a photo. She did not pull out her phone. She just stood there and let the moment be what it was. When I finally stood up to leave that afternoon, after reading 3 more books and helping 2 kids with math homework and fixing a broken drawer, Lorraine was waiting by the exit door. "I'll be back next Thursday, Alfred," she said. "If you don't mind?" My voice was still thick. I cleared my throat. "I don't mind at all," I said. She nodded once. Then she looked at me. Really looked at me, and I knew she understood. Not the details, not the LinkedIn posts or the crushed Lego or the Uber fare, but the shape of it, the weight of it, the kind of grief that comes from being unwanted by the people who are supposed to want you most. I looked at her. She looked at me. Neither of us needed to say another word about my son. I drove home that evening with the red plastic piece still in my coat pocket. But now there was something else in my chest. Not hope exactly, not healing. Just a small, fragile thing that felt like maybe I was not as alone as I thought I was. The Cardinal was at the feeder when I pulled into my driveway. I sat in the truck for a minute watching it eat and thought about an 8-year-old boy who wanted to call me Grandpa. Then I went inside and made tea. Lorraine pulled me aside on Sunday. 3 days had passed since Finn asked if he could call me Grandpa. 3 days since I had cried in an orphanage playroom for the first time since my son told me not to come to Thanksgiving. The alliance between Lorraine and me was still new-formed without discussion, understood without explanation. We were in the hallway outside the reading room when she lowered her voice. "A man called yesterday," she said. "Claimed to be a reporter." I looked at her. She looked back steady and calm. He asked about my net worth, whether I owned property, the exact structure of my pension, how many years I served as principal before I retired. She paused. I refused to answer any of his questions, but I noted the incoming number. 215 area code. Philadelphia. "You don't seem surprised, Alfred," she said. "I'm not," I said. We stood there in the hallway for a moment. Children's voices echoed from the playroom down the hall. Someone was reading a story about a caterpillar. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Lorraine nodded once. We did not need to say another word about my son. What does it say about my son that he only investigates people he thinks are worth money? Thursday afternoon came with cold December light. Lorraine and I sat in the volunteers' break room with 2 mugs of tea. The window overlooked the gravel playground where children ran in heavy coats, their breath coming out in clouds. She had been quiet most of the afternoon. Then, without preamble, she started talking. "My ex-husband was a forensic auditor," she said. "We divorced 10 years ago. I kept the house in the settlement, 3 bedrooms in Clark's Summit. We'd purchased it in 1989. I listened. She stared out the window. In 2021, I sold it. $287,000. After closing costs and taxes, exactly $241,000. She turned to look at me. Every single cent went into the Mave Fund. It's a scholarship endowment I created for underprivileged children in Lackawanna County. Named after my daughter. She died when she was 16. I set my tea down carefully. I currently live in a 1-bedroom apartment, she continued. $780 a month. It has a kitchen the size of a closet and a bathroom with tiles from 1974. People ask if I regret giving it up. I tell them regret what, the house isn't gone. It just has a different owner. She smiled faintly. Your son called that reporter to find out if I was a wealthy donor worth cultivating. He wanted to know if I could be useful to him. The answer is no. I own nothing. I have nothing. I gave it all away to children who will probably never know my name. I sat in silence for a long time. The tea cooled in my hands. Outside, the children were still running. One of them fell and got back up without crying. You make me feel ashamed, I said finally. In the best possible way a man can feel it. Lorraine shook her head. That's not why I told you. I know, I said, but it's still true. I had built 12 bridges in my career. Structures designed to carry thousands of tons without breaking. I had calculated load distribution and compression and tension for 35 years. I had never met anyone who understood weight the way Lorraine Whitfield did. She had built a bridge out of everything she owned, and on the other side stood children who would never know her name. We sat for a while longer without speaking. The tea grew cold. The light through the window turned from gray to darker gray as afternoon slipped toward evening. "The boy who called you," I said. "He wasn't a reporter." "I know," she said. "He was probably someone my son hired. Private investigator, background check service. Someone who gets paid to dig up information on people." I assumed as much. "I'm sorry," I said. She looked at me with that same steady calm I had seen on the bus. The same voice that had read fairy tales to terrified children while the vehicle sank into mud. "You have nothing to apologize for, Alfred. He's my son." "Yes," she said. "And that's the only thing you can't choose. Everything else, how you respond, who you become, what you do with the time you have left, all of that is yours." I thought about the red plastic shard in my coat pocket. The one I had carried for 9 days without showing anyone. The one I would probably carry for the rest of my life. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Of course." "Why did you name it after your daughter, the Fund?" Lorraine looked out the window at the playground. One of the children, a girl with dark braids, was helping a smaller boy tie his shoe. "Because she would have wanted me to," Lorraine said. Maeve believed that people who had more should give more. Not out of obligation, out of gratitude. She used to say that luck was just a gift you didn't earn, and the only honorable thing to do with an unearned gift was to pass it along. She paused. She was 16 when she said that. 16 years old, and she understood something most adults never learn. "What happened to her?" I asked quietly. Lorraine was silent for a moment. "Leukemia," she said. 11 months from diagnosis to the end. We tried everything. None of it worked. I did not know what to say. There are no words for that kind of loss. I knew because I had lost my wife. But losing a child, that was a different order of magnitude entirely. "I'm sorry," I said. Lorraine nodded once. Then she stood up and carried her mug to the small sink in the corner of the break room. She washed it carefully, dried it with a paper towel, and set it back on the shelf. "Come on," she said. "Let's go see if the kids need anything before we leave." We walked to the window one more time. Outside, the children were running across the gravel. One of them was Finn. He was trying to climb a low maple tree in the corner of the yard, reaching for the lowest thick branch. He hadn't made it up yet. My son called again on Sunday. 3 days had passed since I watched Finn try to climb that maple tree. 3 days since Lorraine told me about the investigative call from Philadelphia. 3 days of thinking about what my son was willing to do to people who could not help him. The phone rang at 2 in the afternoon. I was reading the newspaper. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. "Dad." Sterling's voice. Different this time. No tears, no breaking emotion. Just controlled corporate business-like. The voice he used in meetings. "Sterling," I said. "Good Morning Pennsylvania wants you for a holiday segment," he said. "The Thanksgiving Hero Father. They're doing a whole series on everyday people who made a difference. BRETV in Wilkes-Barre. The producers reached out to me directly. I said nothing. This is a critical opportunity for both of us, Dad. If you go on air and tell them we're working through things together, that the family is reconciling, the firm can recover some of the institutional credit we've lost. All you have to do is tell them we are working through things together, Dad. Just that." I let the silence stretch out. Sterling waited. "All right," I said finally. "I'll do the show. Thank you, Dad. Thank you. I'll set it up." He hung up. I set the phone down and stared at the kitchen wall. My son had just asked me to lie on television. He had not used those words. He had not needed to. The campaign began the next day. Monday, Sterling showed up with chicken soup. Homemade, he said. I thanked him and put it in the refrigerator. After he left, I noticed the Whole Foods 365 sticker still stuck to the bottom of the plastic container. I peeled it off and threw it away. Wednesday, he drove me to a routine medical checkup. Sat in the waiting room for 90 minutes without a single complaint. Read a magazine, checked his phone. When I came out, he stood up immediately and asked how it went. I told him it was fine. He drove me home. Friday, he took me to Carmela's Italian restaurant. The same place I used to take my late wife Margaret before she passed. Sterling booked the best table, ordered premium wine, took endless photos, me at the table, me with my water glass, me looking out the window. I ate my meal quietly, took no photos myself. Listened to Sterling talk about how difficult the market was. The market's been brutal, Dad. Absolutely brutal. I nodded. At the end of the night, I drove myself home because Sterling had an early board meeting in Philadelphia the next morning. The pattern continued. 3 weeks. Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. Soup. Medical appointments. Dinners at Carmela's. I counted every single day. 3 weeks. I counted the days. 3 weeks of constant presence. If this were real love, it would be the most beautiful thing my son had ever given me. I just was not sure what kind of love it actually was. Monday, January 6th. Sterling arrived completely unannounced. No pastry boxes this time, no gourmet soup, no warm smile. His face was tense and pale. He walked into my kitchen and sat down across from me without being invited. He said, "I need to tell you something." I waited. Wells Fargo is moving to call in the commercial business loan. $600,000. The deadline is January 31st. I looked at him. He looked back. No tears this time. No performance. Just exhaustion. Loss of the Meridian contract, plus several subsequent cancellations, have completely dried up the firm's liquidity. I need an immediate bridge loan from within the family, just to get through the next quarter. Just until we can restructure. He leaned forward. "Dad, you have that old savings account from your highway consulting days. The one from when you did contract work for the state. You aren't using it. I just need 3 months, Dad. Just 3 months to get back on my feet." I sat very still. My son thought I had money. He thought I had saved something from those consulting years side projects I had done after I retired, extra work to keep myself busy and bring in a little more than the pension. He had no idea. How many Friday dinners does it take to earn the right to ask your father for $600,000? "Let me think about it," I said. Sterling's face tightened. "How much time do you need?" "As much as it takes," I said. He stared at me. I stared back. Neither of us blinked. "Dad, the deadline is January 31st. That's 3.5 weeks. "I understand," I said. "I need an answer." "And you'll get one," I said, "when I'm ready to give it." Sterling stood up. For a moment, I thought he might say something else. But he just grabbed his coat from the back of the chair, walked to the door, and left. I heard his car start in the driveway, heard the tires on the gravel, heard the engine fade as he drove away. I sat in my armchair for hours after that. The house was dark. I did not turn on the lights. I just sat there in the growing darkness thinking. 3 weeks of soup and medical appointments and dinners at Carmela's. 3 weeks of photos and premium wine and endless talk about the brutal market. All of it leading to this. All of it calculated. All of it designed to make me feel like I owed him something. I thought about the small shard of red plastic still sitting in my kitchen drawer. The piece from the Lego set I had left on his doorstep before Thanksgiving. The gift for my grandson that someone had crushed and thrown away like garbage. I thought about Lorraine selling her house and giving every cent to children who would never know her name. I thought about Finn asking if he could call me Grandpa. I thought about my son sitting across from me in this kitchen, asking for $600,000 with the same tone he might use to ask for a cup of coffee. Then I picked up the phone and called Lorraine. The studio lights were brighter than I expected. Lorraine had made 2 phone calls after I reached out to her that Monday night. By Wednesday, I had an invitation to appear on Good Morning Pennsylvania, WBRE-TV in Wilkes-Barre, the same station that had interviewed me after the bus rescue. The producers wanted a follow-up segment for their holiday series Everyday Heroes, Heartwarming Stories, Reconciliation Narratives. Sterling thought I was doing this for him. He had no idea. I sat in the green room while a young makeup artist powdered my forehead. The lights made everything too bright, too sharp. I pulled out my phone and looked at Sterling's company Instagram. Yesterday they had posted another photo Sterling at a charity gala arm around Valentina caption about family values and community leadership. 847 likes. I set the phone down. My hand was steady. Diane Palmer walked in 10 minutes before we went live. She had that morning show smile that probably took years to perfect, warm, but not too warm, curious, but not invasive. She wore a coral blazer and had notes on a tablet she kept glancing at between questions. Professional. Practiced. She clearly expected a heartwarming reunion story. Mr. Thornton, she said, extending her hand. Thank you so much for coming back. Our viewers have been asking about you since Thanksgiving. I shook her hand. Happy to be here, I said. We walked onto the set. The lights were even brighter there. A small camera on a tripod, a red recording light that did not blink. 2 chairs angled toward each other. A white backdrop. A tiny microphone clipped to my collar, picking up every word. Diane started with the softball questions. How did it feel to be called a hero? What went through my mind when I saw the bus? Did I ever think about the risk I was taking? I answered each one calmly, factually, no embellishment. Then she pivoted. And your son Sterling reached out after seeing the rescue footage. He did, I said, 3 days later, which was exactly 3 years and 41 days after the last time we spoke. Diane's smile held, but something shifted in her eyes. But you've reconciled now, she said. That must feel wonderful. I paused, looked directly at the camera, then back at Diane. There is a big difference between apologizing because you hurt someone and apologizing because your business is hurting, I said. One comes from the chest, the other comes from the wallet. Diane's professional smile froze. I continued, my voice calm and measured. Sotium. I only learned my son's company was in crisis from reading the Pittsburgh Business Times. The timeline is quite clear. He reached out 3 days after the rescue footage went viral. His business partners were canceling contracts. His reputation was damaged. The reconciliation, I paused, was strategic. The camera operator's hand trembled slightly. Diane tried to recover her voice, still bright, but thinner now. I'm sure this has been difficult for both of you. It has, I said. But I think it's important to be honest about what reconciliation actually is. My son asked me to come on this show and tell you we're working through things together, that we're a family again. He wanted me to help repair his image. I looked at Diane. She looked back. The studio was completely silent except for the hum of the lights. I'm here to tell the truth instead, I said. Diane signaled to cut to commercial. I unclipped the microphone, stood up, and walked out. Have you ever said something you can't take back? Not in anger. Anger gives you an excuse. But in that cold, clear moment when you know exactly what you're doing and you do it anyway. The words don't burn coming out. They freeze, and you watch them land like ice on skin. I returned home at 11:47 a.m. The house was quiet. I made a sandwich, ate it standing at the kitchen counter, washed the plate, dried it, put it back in the cabinet. At 2:15 p.m., my phone rang. Sterling's name on the screen. I answered. "What the hell did you just do?" He screamed. His voice crackled with rage through the speaker. "Do you have any idea my partners are calling Rachel is—" I answered the reporter's questions. I said calmly, "You humiliated me on live television. You made me look like what?" Silence. Then his voice came back louder. "You just destroyed my company and my relationship with you." I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, looked at the kitchen clock. 2:15 p.m. I had listened to him scream for exactly 47 seconds. "In that specific order?" I asked quietly. The silence that followed lasted 6 seconds. I counted them. Then the line went dead. I set the phone down on the counter. Stood there for a long moment. Then I walked to the stove and put the kettle on. Earl Grey. Sterling used to drink it with 3 sugars when he was 12, sitting at this same table telling me about his day at school. He would scrunch his nose at the bergamot smell until the sugar hit his tongue. I never added sugar to mine. I told him, "Some things are supposed to be bitter, son. They teach you to appreciate the sweet." He stopped drinking tea with me when he turned 16. The kettle whistled. The same kettle from 25 years ago, the handle slightly loose, the spout stained brown from decades of use. I poured the water over the tea bag and watched it steep. The bergamot scent mixed with the afternoon sunlight coming through the window. I let it steep too long. The tea turned dark, bitter. I sat down at the kitchen table and drank it anyway. Every drop. The bitter taste sharp on my tongue. The cost of truth measured in bergamot and regret. The tea was bitter. I drank every drop. Lorraine's hand on my sleeve was gentle, but her eyes weren't. 6 days had passed since the television interview. 6 days since Sterling had screamed at me over the phone and hung up in silence. 6 days since I drank that bitter cup of Earl Grey and accepted the cost of truth. Now it was Wednesday afternoon at St. Anthony's. I had been reading to a group of children in the library when Lorraine appeared in the doorway. She waited until I finished the chapter, then caught my eye. A small gesture. "Follow me." We walked to the empty craft room at the end of the hall. She closed the door behind us. "I need to tell you something," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. Something cold. I waited. "Oh, yesterday afternoon I arrived early for my shift. I was walking past the small meeting room near the office. The door wasn't fully closed. I heard voices inside." She paused. Sterling and Valentina were touring the facility with the director, probably for a photo opportunity. I stopped when I heard Valentina's voice through the gap in the door. Lorraine looked directly at me. She said, "The old man needs to just sign the papers. The sooner he's gone, the easier this gets." I stood very still. Though Sterling said nothing, Lorraine continued. I waited, listened. He offered no objection, no disagreement. He just stayed silent. I let the words settle. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, children were laughing. "I walked away quietly," Lorraine said. "They never saw me. I'm telling you now because you need to know exactly what they're thinking." I nodded once. "I'm sorry, Lorraine," I said. "I never meant to drag you into this." She shook her head. "You didn't drag me in, Alfred. I stepped in myself." We stood there for a moment. Then she touched my arm once, brief steadying, and walked out. When does a son stop being a son? Not at 18, not at 30, but maybe at the exact moment his wife says, "Sooner he's gone," and the son says nothing at all. Before I show you what I wrote on that legal pad, comment A or B plus one reason A equals he should protect himself / B equals he should confront them directly. Tell me why in 5 to 10 words. Quick note, some details ahead are recreated for storytelling impact. The lesson is what matters. After Lorraine left, I stayed at St. Anthony's past closing time. The building emptied out slowly. Children picked up by foster families or social workers. Staff finishing their paperwork and heading home. Lights clicking off in rooms down the hall. By 6:30, I was alone. I sat in the small office they let me use sometimes, barely more than a closet with a desk and a chair. The fluorescent light hummed above me. I pulled out a legal pad and a pen. I had spent 35 years as an engineer. I knew how to document a problem, how to break it into components, how to design a solution that would hold weight. I started writing. Timeline. November 21st, 2022. The phone call. Sterling tells me not to come to Thanksgiving because I would embarrass him. 3 years and 41 days since we last spoke. November 24th, 2022. The bus rescue. 22 children. Finn Hayes trapped under the seat. Viral footage. November 27th, 2022. Sterling appears on my doorstep with flowers and bakery boxes. Valentina filming secretly. I walk away. December 1st, 2022. Sterling returns for an 11-minute visit. Photo taken. Uber fare left for me to pay. December 3rd, 2022. I find the crushed Lego pieces in Sterling's driveway. The gift I left for my grandson thrown away like garbage. December 15th, 2022 to January 6th, 2023 3-week campaign. Soup. Medical appointments. Dinners at Carmela's. All leading to the loan request. January 6th, 2023. Sterling asks for $600,000 with a January 31st deadline. January 9th, 2023. I tell the truth on television. January 14th, 2023. Valentina says, the sooner he's gone, the easier this gets. Sterling says nothing. I wrote it all down in neat block letters. Engineer's handwriting, clear, precise, dated, timed. Then I turned to a fresh page. Not rage, I thought. Precision. They want me gone. I'll show them what gone looks like. I wrote 3 words at the top of the page. Step 1, documentation. Below it, bullet points. Gather evidence. Secure witnesses. Create a record that cannot be disputed or erased. Lorraine's testimony about what she heard. The timeline I had just written. The red plastic Lego shard I kept in my kitchen drawer. Step 2, protection. More bullet points. Protect the assets they're trying to seize. Make it impossible for them to access what they think I have. Legal barriers. Financial barriers. Physical barriers if necessary. Step 3, exposure. The final set of bullet points. Make it public. Make it undeniable. Make sure everyone who needs to know the truth has access to it. Not revenge. Just transparency. Let the light in and let people see what's really there. I spent 35 years building bridges that could hold 10,000 tons. Now I was designing something different. Not to hold weight. To bear witness. The fluorescent light buzzed above me. I checked my watch. 7:43 p.m. I had been writing for over an hour. 3 steps. 3 pages. Every word in my own handwriting dated and timed at the top. Wednesday, January 15th, 2023, 6:30 p.m. to 7:43 p.m. I folded the legal pad and slid it into my jacket pocket. Then I stood up, turned off the fluorescent light, and walked out of the office. The hallway was dark. My footsteps echoed on the tile floor. I let myself out through the side door and walked to my truck in the empty parking lot. The night was cold, clear, stars visible above the streetlights. I started the engine and sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel looking at the dark building behind me. 3 steps, I thought. Documentation, protection, Exposure. I had the plan. Now I just needed to execute it. I drove home through empty streets, the legal pad in my jacket pocket pressing against my ribs with every breath. Patricia Holt asked me 3 times if I was absolutely certain. 2 days had passed since I wrote those 3 pages in the small office at St. Anthony's. 2 days since I folded the plan into my jacket pocket and drove home. Step 1, documentation. Step 2, protection. Step 3, exposure. Friday morning, I called Patricia. She had been Penn-Doty's senior legal counsel for 12 years before opening her private practice. I had worked with her on 3 federal bridge contracts and trusted her precision. Patricia, I said, I need to execute a charitable donation, today, if possible. She cleared her calendar. Now I sat in her office in downtown Scranton, the paperwork spread across her desk. She looked at the numbers, then looked at me. Alfred, this is your entire liquid savings. Are you absolutely certain? I've been certain for 3 weeks, I said. It just took this long to clear the paperwork. She studied my face. Then she asked again. This is $47,000. Once this is executed, it's irrevocable. You understand that? I understand. She asked a 3rd time. Are you absolutely certain? Yes, I said. Patricia nodded once. Then she began preparing the final documents. The donation would be split evenly. Half to St. Anthony's Orphanage Fund. Half to the Maeve Whitfield Scholarship Fund, the endowment Lorraine had created with the sale of her house. Both organizations served children in Lackawanna County who had nowhere else to turn. Patricia worked in silence, her fingers moving across the keyboard with the same precision she had used to draft federal contract language. 15 minutes later, she slid the papers across her desk. Sign here, and here, initial here. I signed. My handwriting engineer's block letters clear and legible. Patricia picked up her phone and called the bank. Confirmed the transfer, spoke to someone in the legal department, verified the documentation. Then she hung up and looked at me. Effective date January 17th, 2023. Irrevocable. This can't be undone. Good, I said. She handed me the original receipts in a sealed envelope. Proof of donation. Dated, stamped, notarized, legal and binding. I thanked her, paid her fee, and drove home. In my kitchen, I unlocked the drawer where I kept important documents. Insurance papers, the deed to my house, my will. And there, in a small plastic bag, the red shard of Lego plastic I had found in Sterling's driveway. I placed the donation receipts beside it. Then I locked the drawer and put the key back on its hook. You don't lock the safe after the thief breaks in. You empty it before he arrives. Monday afternoon, Sterling showed up unannounced. I heard his car in the driveway at 2:43 p.m. I was making tea. I did not get up to meet him at the door. I just waited until he knocked, then called out for him to come in. He walked into the kitchen carrying a white envelope. His face was tight, controlled. This was business Sterling. Corporate Sterling. The one who negotiated contracts and closed deals. Jacket, he said. I brought the paperwork we discussed. He set the envelope on the kitchen table and pulled out a document. Multiple pages. Dense legal text. This is a standard intra-family credit guarantee, he said. Simple formality. Just sign the bottom line, and we can move forward. I picked up the document and looked at the first page. The language was thick, technical, deliberately opaque. Let me have someone look this over, I said. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Sterling's jaw tightened. You don't need anyone else, Dad. It's just a formality. It protects both of us. Formalities are fine if someone else reads them too, I said. I pulled out my phone and sent a text. 3 words. Now, kitchen table. Sterling watched me. What are you doing? Getting a second opinion, I said. 5 minutes later, Lorraine knocked on the door. I let her in. She nodded to Sterling, polite professional, and sat down at the table. I handed her the document. She read slowly, carefully, turning pages, her finger tracing lines of text. Her expression did not change, but something in her eyes did. She reached the last page, read it twice. Then she set the document down on the table with deliberate precision. Not a slap, not a toss. Careful, like handling evidence. Lorraine's silence said everything. The way she set that paper down, not a slap, not a toss. Careful, like handling evidence. She made eye contact with me, held it for 3 seconds, then looked away. I need a few days to think about this, I said to Sterling. His face flushed. Dad, the deadline is January 31st. That's 11 days. I need an answer now. And you'll get one, I said, when I'm ready to give it. Sterling stood up, grabbed the document from the table, shoved it back into the white envelope. This is ridiculous, he said. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be. He walked out, did not say goodbye, did not close the door gently. I heard his car start, heard the tires spin slightly on the gravel as he backed out too fast. Lorraine and I sat in silence until the sound of his engine faded completely. Then she reached for the document. Sterling had left it on the table in his rush to leave. She spread it flat and turned to the 4th page. Alfred, she said quietly, this is not a family guarantee. This is an asset seizure document. I nodded. I had suspected as much. Her finger traced a paragraph near the bottom of page 4. Section 4, subsection C, she read aloud. In the event the primary borrower defaults on scheduled payments or fails to meet obligations as determined solely by the creditor, all collateral assets, including but not limited to real property, liquid accounts, and personal holdings, transfer immediately to creditor control without additional notice or judicial review. She looked up at me. If you'd signed this, Alfred, he wouldn't have needed you to die. He'd have owned everything the moment you missed a single monthly payment he deemed insufficient. I sat very still. Thank you for reading it, I said. Lorraine folded the document and slid it across the table to me. Oh, what are you going to do? She asked. I thought about the donation receipts in my kitchen drawer. Dated January 17th. 3 days before Sterling walked through my door with this document. 3 days before he tried to take everything I had left. I already did it, I said. 2 mugs of hot tea sat between us on the kitchen table. Earl Grey. Lorraine had made it the way she always did when we needed to think clearly, strong enough to taste the bergamot, weak enough to drink while it was still hot. Shakikakins. It's called a collateral assignment agreement, she said, turning the contract pages Sterling had left behind. Her reading glasses caught the kitchen light. Section 4, subsection C. The moment you sign this, every asset you own, the house, the car, your pension deposits, everything transfers to his control. Not if you default. When you sign, I sipped my tea. It burned going down, but I welcomed it. He structured it as a family guarantee to avoid scrutiny. Lorraine continued. No lawyer review, no witnesses required. Just your signature and he owns everything. Probably planned to refinance against the house value within a week. He won't find anything to refinance, I said quietly. She looked up from the contract. The donation, $47,000, split between St. Anthony's General Fund and the Maeve Whitfield Scholarship. January 17th. I pulled the receipts from my shirt pocket, smoothed them on the table between our tea mugs. 3 days before he walked through that door. Lorraine studied the receipts, then looked at me with something I couldn't quite name. Not surprise, not pride, something older than both. You knew he was coming. I knew someone was coming, I said. After that television interview, after Meridian canceled, after his whole world started collapsing, I knew he'd remember his father had money. I just didn't know it would hurt this much when he finally did. She reached across the table, placed her hand over mine. Her fingers were warm from holding the tea mug. "We should do this publicly," I said. "Carmela's restaurant, Friday night, 7 o'clock. You want witnesses?" "I want him to understand that his choices have consequences," I said. "That you can't build a life on other people's backs without eventually running out of backs to stand on." Lorraine nodded slowly. "I'll make sure Patricia is ready. If he tries anything legal afterward, we'll need documentation that you were of sound mind acting without coercion." "Then I better call him," I said. I used the kitchen phone. Sterling answered on the second ring, his voice carrying that slightly breathless quality of someone who'd been waiting. "Dad. Hey. Did you have a chance to think about what we discussed?" "Well, I did," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'll sign your papers. Friday night, 7 o'clock, Carmela's restaurant on Morrison Avenue, the one with the red awning." The relief in his voice was immediate, almost painful to hear. That's great, Dad. Really great. I can bring Patricia if you want everything properly notarized." "Just you and me," I said. "Father and son, the way it should be." "Right. Of course." A pause. "I really appreciate this. You're saving my whole company. 40 employees, they all keep their jobs because of you." 7 o'clock, I repeated. "Don't be late." I hung up before he could say anything else. That night, Thursday, January 22nd, I sat alone in my study while Lorraine called Patricia Holt to arrange the legal backup. The donation receipts lay on my desk next to the red Lego shard I'd found in the driveway 3 weeks ago. Finn's Lego, the piece Sterling had crushed under his wheel driving away from the orphanage visit. How do you reconcile love with clarity? How do you hold both truths at once, that someone is your son, your blood, the boy you raised, and also someone you barely recognize? I remembered teaching him to ride a bicycle in 1994. He was 7, all knobby knees, and determination refusing training wheels because champions don't need help. I'd run behind him for 43 minutes, one hand on the seat, until he finally found his balance and pulled away. I'd stood there on the sidewalk watching him go, feeling that strange mix of pride and loss that all parents know. I remembered his high school football games Friday nights under the lights, watching him play quarterback with the same fierce independence. He'd never wanted me on the sideline where other dads stood. "It's distracting," he'd said. So I'd sat in the bleachers 20 rows up alone. I remembered moving him into his Philadelphia apartment in 2009. 24 years old, new job climbing already. He'd thanked me for the help, then asked me to leave before his colleagues arrived for a housewarming party. "They don't need to meet everyone yet," he'd said. I remembered his MBA graduation in 2012. He'd walked across that stage, shaken hands with the dean, and I'd watched from the audience thinking I built bridges that will stand for 100 years. But I don't know if I built this right. The Lego shard sat there in the lamplight, red plastic sharp enough to cut. He was still my son. That hadn't changed. What changed was that I could finally see him, clearly see who he'd become, when I wasn't looking, when I was too busy being proud to notice he'd learned the wrong lessons from my strength. I picked up the Lego piece, felt its edges press into my palm. Tomorrow night at Carmela's, I would give my son the most important lesson I had left to teach. Not about bridge engineering or work ethic or endurance. About consequences. About the difference between taking what you want and earning what you need. I put the receipts in my jacket pocket, the jacket I'd wear tomorrow night. Put the Lego shard beside them. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. tomorrow night, Carmela's restaurant. Tomorrow night, my son would learn that the money he came to steal had been gone for 6 days. I arrived at Carmela's 10 minutes early and chose the table by the window. The restaurant smelled like crushed garlic and fresh thyme warm butter melting into bread. Amber light from copper fixtures caught the edges of white tablecloths made the wine glasses glow. I'd worn my good jacket, the one with the donation receipts in the left pocket, and the red Lego shard tucked beside them. Sterling walked through the door at exactly 7 o'clock. I watched him scan the room, find me raise one hand in greeting. Then I saw the figure behind him. Valentina. She wore a dress the color of money deep emerald that caught the light when she moved. Her smile was practiced camera-ready, the kind she'd worn in all those social media posts from charity galas Sterling's company had sponsored. She'd never called me, never visited, never acknowledged my existence except as a name in Sterling's occasional stories about his self-made success. "Dad," Sterling said, reaching the table. "You don't mind, do you? We thought it should be a full family dinner." I stood, shook his hand, nodded at Valentina. "Alfred," she said, "not Dad, not yet." They sat across from me. Sterling ordered a bottle of Barolo, $87. I saw it on the wine list, without asking if I wanted any. Valentina studied the menu like she was reading a contract, pointing out dishes to Sterling, in a voice just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Osso buco, branzino al forno, veal scallopine. When the server came to me, I ordered pasta primavera. "Just the pasta?" Sterling asked. "Come on, Dad, get something good. I'm buying." "The pasta is good," I said. It had been Margaret's favorite. The last meal I'd cooked for her before she died. Spring vegetables, olive oil, fresh basil from the windowsill garden she'd kept, even when her hands shook too much to water it properly. She'd eaten 3 bites and told me it was perfect. Sterling poured the wine when it arrived. 3 glasses. He raised his toward the center of the table. "To family," he said. Valentina lifted hers immediately. I picked mine up, brought it close enough to my lips that the movement looked like drinking, set it back down. The glass was still full. "So," Sterling said, settling back in his chair with the ease of someone who'd already won. "How's Lorraine still volunteering at that orphanage?" "She is," I said. "That's nice, really nice." He glanced at Valentina. "We should do more of that kind of thing. Community engagement. Good for the brand." Valentina nodded, sipped her wine. "I've been thinking about a women's entrepreneurship initiative. Something photogenic." The conversation continued like that surface-level performative, the kind of talk that fills space without saying anything. Sterling mentioned a potential new client in Pittsburgh. Valentina talked about an interior designer she'd hired to redo their home office. I answered questions with the minimum number of words required. A last meal. That's what this was. Not the kind where the condemned gets to choose. The kind where the executioner pretends it's just dinner. The food came. Sterling's osso buco arrived in a white bowl, the braised veal shank rising from saffron risotto like an architect's model of excess. Valentina's branzino came whole, its eye still intact, roasted lemon slices arranged like currency around the plate. My pasta primavera looked like what it was: simple vegetables, olive oil, no pretense. I ate it slowly, tasted the basil, remembered Margaret's hands shaking over the colander. Sterling ate like a man celebrating a victory that hadn't happened yet. He told stories about difficult clients he'd won, overused words like synergy and optimization and strategic partnership, the way other people used punctuation. Valentina laughed at the right moments, touched his arm twice, performed the role of supportive wife with the precision of someone who understood that marriage, like business, required consistent branding. I watched them both, studied the way Sterling's smile never quite reached his eyes, noted how Valentina's hand moved toward her wine glass whenever the conversation threatened to slow down, recognized the practiced choreography of 2 people working together toward a shared goal. At 8:15, the server cleared the main courses. Sterling reached down beside his chair, pulled a leather briefcase onto his lap. The kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He unzipped it with care, extracted a manila envelope already softened at the edges from handling. "So," he said, placing the envelope on the table between us. "I had the bank's attorneys draw everything up, fully notarized, completely legal. All it needs is your signature." He slid the contract out, placed it in front of me. I could see the signature line at the bottom, a blank space waiting to transfer everything I owned into my son's control. "Just sign right here at the bottom, Dad," Sterling said. His voice had shifted into something smoother, more rehearsed. "You don't have to worry about a single thing after this. I'll take care of everything. The house, the bills, the property taxes, all of it. You can just relax, enjoy retirement." Valentina leaned forward. Her hand crossed the table, stopped just short of touching mine. "Dad," she said. The word landed like a stone in still water. This really means everything to us. First time she'd ever called me that. I looked at the contract, looked at my son, looked at the woman who'd married him for the climb and was now watching that climb turn into a fall. Sterling pulled a pen from his jacket, heavy, silver, expensive. He set it beside the contract, turned it so the tip pointed toward my hand. "Whenever you're ready," he said. But his eyes said now. I picked up the pen. The weight of it surprised me. Or maybe my hand just remembered what signing would mean. Section 4, subsection C. Immediate asset transfer. Everything I'd built in 65 years, everything Margaret and I had saved, everything I'd planned to leave behind, gone the moment the ink dried. I looked at the signature line, looked at my son's face, eager and anxious and trying to hide both, looked at Valentina's performed concern. I set the pen down on the white tablecloth, 2 inches from the signature line. Didn't sign. The restaurant noise continued around us. Other tables, laughing, glasses, clinking, the kitchen door swinging open and closed. But at our table, the air had stopped moving. Sterling's smile held frozen, half-formed like a photograph taken mid-expression. Valentina's hand stopped reaching for her wine glass, suspended over the table. The pen rested there between us, silver against white linen, unsigned. I unbuttoned my overcoat and reached into the inside pocket. Sterling's eyes followed my hand. Valentina leaned forward slightly, her emerald dress catching the amber light. The restaurant continued around us, laughter from the bar, someone's birthday celebration. 3 tables over the kitchen door, swinging open with a burst of heat and garlic. I pulled out the envelope. Heavy brown paper, legal-sized, the kind that holds documents meant to last. Set it on the white tablecloth next to Sterling's contract. The 2 envelopes sat there side by side, his future, my past. I opened mine slowly. Unfolded the papers inside with the same deliberate care I'd used reviewing bridge specifications for 40 years. Slid them across the table until they rested directly in front of Sterling's hands. Donation receipts. 2 of them. Dated January 17, 2023. St. Anthony's Orphanage General Fund, $23,500. Irrevocable charitable contribution. Maeve Whitfield Memorial Scholarship Fund, $23,500. Irrevocable charitable contribution. Both stamped, notarized, processed. Both signed by Paul Hammond at the orphanage and Patricia Holt as witness. Both already deposited, already spent, already gone. "Chica, I donated my entire savings account a week ago, son," I said. My voice was level, engineer, steady. "There is absolutely nothing left in that bank for you to use as collateral." The blood drained from Sterling's face so fast I could track it. Color leaving his cheeks. His lips going pale. His hands going white where they gripped the edge of the table. Valentina's wine glass hit the tablecloth with a sharp click. Red wine sloshed, but didn't spill. Sterling stared at the receipts. His eyes moved across the numbers, the dates, the official seals. I watched him do the math. Watched him understand. January 17th. 3 days before he'd walked into my house with his briefcase and his practiced smile and his $600,000 plan. The silence at our table was louder than anything else in that restaurant. Sterling's voice came out strangled. You knew. You knew I was coming. I knew someone would, I said. After Meridian canceled. After your interview went viral for the wrong reasons. After your whole world started collapsing and you needed money you hadn't earned. I knew you'd remember your father had some. I reached across the table, slid the receipts back, returned them to my envelope. Put the envelope back in my coat pocket where it had been resting against my chest all evening. Where the red Lego shard still pressed against the fabric. The contract you brought, Mom. I said Section 4, Subsection C, that wasn't a family guarantee. That was immediate asset seizure. The moment I signed, everything I own would have transferred to your control. Not if I defaulted. When I signed. Sterling looked down at his own contract still lying there with the silver pen beside it. Didn't respond. Couldn't. How many times can a son break his father's heart before the father stops handing him the pieces? I looked at Sterling, really looked at him. 37 years old. Everything I'd taught him about strength and persistence and never giving up, and none of what I'd tried to teach him about integrity and seeing people as human beings instead of assets to leverage. Oh, do you remember what you said to me? I asked. About your father-in-law, about the flannel shirt. Sterling's jaw tightened. He remembered. You told me that if I stood next to your father-in-law wearing a flannel shirt, people would mistake me for his driver, I said. Each word precise, measured, surgical. You said it would be embarrassing, that I didn't understand professional optics. Valentina turned her head, stared at the floor. Her face had gone rigid. Well then, I said. Go see him. He is a very successful litigation lawyer. Surely he can help you secure your loan. Sterling's hands were shaking now. He still couldn't meet my eyes. I raised my hand, caught the server's attention. The young man approached with practiced politeness, his order pad already out. Check, please, I said. Separate. Sterling's head snapped up. Dad, no, I'll pay for... No, I said. One word, firm, final. The server nodded, walked away. Returned 90 seconds later with a small leather folder. Set it beside my water glass. I opened my wallet, old brown leather cracked at the fold, the same one I'd carried for 20 years. Pulled out 2 20s, laid them flat on the table. Counted the change from my pocket. $34 exactly. Pasta Primavera water with lemon 20% tip. $34. The exact cost of saying goodbye to someone who never really saw you in the first place. I stood, slid my arms into my heavy overcoat. Buttoned it slowly, each button a deliberate choice. The envelope with the receipts pressed against my ribs. The Lego shard sat in the other pocket, sharp and permanent. I looked down at Sterling one last time. My son. My blood. The boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle and helped move to Philadelphia and watched graduate with an MBA. The man who'd crushed a child's toy under his wheel driving away from an orphanage. The stranger who'd come to my house with a contract designed to steal everything I'd ever built. I love you, son, I said. That will never change. But from this night forward, I don't owe you anything. Sterling's mouth opened. No sound came out. I turned away. Walked past the bar where couples leaned close over cocktails. Walked past the hostess stand where a family of 4 waited for their table. Pushed open the heavy wooden door. The cold January air hit my face like a judgment. Clean. Sharp. Honest. I walked to my truck in the parking lot, its blue paint dull under the streetlights. Started the engine. Let it warm for 30 seconds while I sat there in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, breath fogging in the cold. Then I put it in gear and drove toward home. Toward the empty house where Lorraine was staying at her sister's tonight, giving me space to do what needed doing, toward the quiet rooms and the dark windows and the life I'd choose to build from here. No one was waiting, but for the first time in months that felt like freedom. The house was dark when I unlocked the front door at 9:47. I stepped inside, turned the deadbolt, listened to the click echo through the empty hall. No voices, just the familiar creak of floorboards and the hum of the refrigerator 2 rooms away. I hung my overcoat on the hook by the door. The donation receipts still in the left pocket, the red Lego shard in the right. I left them both where they were. In the kitchen, I filled the kettle and lit the gas. Blue flame caught and spread in a perfect circle. I watched it the way I'd watched 1,000 controlled burns on construction sites contained heat, doing exactly what it was supposed to do. Earl Grey, 2 minutes steeping. No sugar. I carried the mug to my armchair by the window and sat down. Outside, the first real snowflakes of the season drifted through the cone of light from the street lamp. Slow, deliberate, each one following its own path down. I thought about the first time I'd taken Margaret to Carmela's. 1987. She'd worn a blue dress and ordered the pasta primavera because it was the only thing on the menu she recognized. We'd split a bottle of house wine that cost $12 and tasted like vinegar. Halfway through the meal, she'd looked at me and said, "This is the best meal of my life." I'd laughed, told her she needed to get out more. She'd shaken her head and touched my hand. "It's not the food," she said. "It's the company." Tonight's pasta primavera had tasted just as good. Maybe better. I'd eaten it for both of us, for the man I'd been in 1987 and the man I'd become by 2023. For the father who'd raised a son the best way he knew how, and for the father who'd finally learned when to stop. Snow doesn't fall with violence. It just settles. Quiet. Patient. Covering what needs to be covered, leaving the rest alone. I fell asleep in that chair sometime after 11. Tuesday morning, I woke to gray light and a stiff neck. Brewed coffee strong and black, the way I'd been drinking it since 1982. Outside the kitchen window, a single cardinal sat at the bird feeder, bright red against the white snow. Not lonely, just alone. There is a difference. I brought in the newspaper with my coffee. Front page, national politics. Page 2, local zoning. Page B4, bottom right corner, 4 inches of column space. A Philadelphia consulting firm had filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy, unable to restructure $600,000 in commercial liability with Wells Fargo. 40 employees. No layoff timeline announced. No mention of the viral video. No mention of me. Just a small business, failing the way small businesses fail every day. I read it twice, folded the paper, walked it to the recycling bin, came back inside and washed my mug. Then I picked up my phone and opened the message thread with Lorraine. Typed, "Are you still heading to the center this Thursday?" The reply came back in 43 seconds. Of course, the boy is waiting for his grandpa. I stared at those words. The boy. 8 years old. Dark hair. Quiet voice. The one who'd been trying to climb the maple tree in St. Anthony's yard for 3 weeks, getting a little higher each time, never giving up. Finn. The one who'd asked if he could call me Grandpa. The one I'd said yes to. I typed back, "I'll be there." Outside, the cardinal finished eating and flew away, a streak of red against white sky. The feeder swung empty in the wind. Thursday was 2 days away. I had work gloves in the garage, a tape measure, some scrap lumber left from the porch repair. Maybe I could build a better handhold for that maple tree. Something safe. Something that would help a boy climb higher without falling. I poured a fresh cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. The house was quiet. My phone stayed silent on the counter. But inside my chest, something that had been clenched tight for months was finally starting to unwind. Thursday afternoon, I pulled into St. Anthony's parking lot at 2:47. The tension that had lived in my shoulders for months, that constant bracing for the next crisis, the next manipulation, had finally loosened enough that I could breathe all the way down. The front doors burst open before I'd even turned off the engine. Finn came running across the patchy winter grass jacket unzipped and flapping behind him. Grandpa, I climbed all the way to the top branch today. I stepped out, closed the door, and knelt down so we were eye to eye. I saw you, kiddo, I said. Last week. I was waiting for you to tell me yourself. He stopped mid-bounce. You knew the whole time. The whole time. You made it look easy. He stared at me for 3 full seconds, then burst into laughter, genuine, unguarded, the kind that only comes when a child feels safe enough to be surprised. You're tricky, Grandpa, he said. I'm patient, I corrected. There's a difference. Inside, 7 kids sat cross-legged in the reading room while I read from a children's book about bridge engineering. They asked good questions. Why triangles instead of squares? How do you know if a bridge is strong enough? I answered each one the way I'd answered junior engineers 40 years ago, with patience, with precision, with the understanding that asking questions is never weakness. Lorraine stood in the doorway with a quiet smile. When the kids scattered, she walked over. You're good at this, she said. I've had practice, I said. It was the most normal, unhurried afternoon I'd had in months. 17 days later, on a Saturday evening in February, my phone rang. An unknown Philadelphia number. Something made me pick up anyway. Sterling's voice, no performance, no polished cadence. Just exhaustion worn all the way through. The firm officially filed Chapter 11 today. I just wanted you to hear it from me directly. I dried my hands on the dish towel and leaned against the counter. I already knew, son. A long silence followed. Then another. We went back and forth with short words and long pauses, neither of us asking the questions we both carried. I just wanted to call, he finally whispered. I'm glad you did, I said, and I meant it. Take care of yourself, son. I hung up and stood there recognizing what had just happened. No agenda. No ask. Just a tired man telling his father that everything had fallen apart. It was the most honest conversation Sterling had ever offered me. Exhausted honesty, but honesty still. The weeks turned into months. March rain washed away the last snow. April brought crocuses and longer evenings. Every Thursday, Lorraine and I drove to St. Anthony's together, stopped at the same diner beforehand, her Greek salad, my turkey sandwich coffee always slightly too weak. It wasn't romance. Just 2 people who'd both known loneliness, choosing each other's company instead. Finn mastered the maple tree and moved on to the taller oak across the playground, climbing it the same way he did everything, patient, methodical, checking each grip before committing his weight. In late March, Lorraine launched a life skills curriculum for the older kids. She asked if I'd teach a module on reading blueprints. I told her I'd be honored. 12 kids showed up to my first session. None of them knew about the federal bridges or the Penn-Doughty career or the decades of specifications. They only knew I never made them feel small for asking the same question twice. Somehow, that was worth more than every credential I'd ever earned. On the last Thursday of April, I watched Finn help a smaller boy reach the first branch of the maple tree. The way he steadied the child's foot, patient, careful, waiting until the grip was solid before letting go. I recognized that gesture. I'd used it 1,000 times on job sites teaching apprentices to climb scaffolding safely, but I had never taught it to Finn. He'd learned it by watching, by being shown what steady presence looked like. And now he was passing it forward to someone smaller who needed help reaching higher. That's how it works. Not through blood or obligation, through showing up, through being the kind of person worth imitating. The branch held. The small boy climbed. Finn stayed below hands, ready until the child was safe. The first week of November, Finn announced he was taking charge of the turkey preparation team. That lesson about showing up had taken root in ways I hadn't predicted. Now he wanted to lead, wanted to teach the younger kids, wanted to do it right. St. Anthony's was hosting 60 children this Thanksgiving, twice as many as the year before. Paul Hammond had secured additional funding, expanded the dining hall, ordered 4 turkeys instead of 2. Lorraine and I had spent 3 evenings coordinating volunteers. Finn cornered me in the industrial kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon, his face set with 9-year-old determination. "Grandpa, you have to teach me how to carve the turkey." I looked at him, then at Lorraine reviewing the seating chart at the counter, then back at Finn. I have absolutely no idea how to carve a whole turkey," I said. "As an engineer, I only know how to measure steel." His face fell. "But you know everything." "I know bridges, load calculations, soil composition reports. I have never in 65 years successfully carved a turkey." Lorraine's shoulders started shaking with silent laughter. "We could learn together," Finn suggested. "There's probably a video." So we did. Pulled up a YouTube tutorial on Lorraine's phone, propped it against a bag of flour on the counter. A cheerful chef explained the process in 14 steps that might as well have been instructions for building a suspension bridge in a foreign language. "Just follow the natural separation of the joint," the chef said brightly. "What joint?" Finn whispered. "I have no idea," I whispered back. We watched 40 minutes. Replayed the breast carving section 3 times. Took notes on a paper towel. Then admitted defeat and walked over to Carol, the head cook. "We need help," I said. Carol looked at my notes, at Finn's hopeful face, at the phone still playing the video. She smiled. "I'll teach you both Wednesday, hands-on, no videos." Lorraine crossed the kitchen, still laughing. "The great bridge builder doesn't know how to slice a bird." "I built 12 federal bridges, Lorraine. None of those blueprints required carving a turkey." Sometimes the biggest victories aren't the ones that make you feel powerful. They're the ones that make you laugh at yourself while a 9-year-old watches a YouTube video you can't follow. Thanksgiving morning, I woke at 6:30, brewed coffee, stood by the kitchen window watching frost cover the backyard grass. The red cardinal landed at the feeder, eating quietly against the white. 1 year ago, this same kitchen, this same mug, that phone call. Sterling's voice explaining why I wasn't invited. Why a man who'd built federal bridges for 40 years didn't fit the image his son wanted to project. This morning the phone sat silent. No calls expected. No rejections coming. I didn't know where Sterling was spending Thanksgiving. Didn't know if his firm had recovered, if he was still with Valentina, still trying to climb a ladder that had already collapsed. I didn't ask. Didn't look it up. That relationship was no longer the center of my universe. A year is just a circle. But if you walk it right, you don't end up where you started. You end up somewhere better. I pulled on my red and black flannel shirt. Checked my pocket, the Lego shards still there, sharp and red, a piece of something broken that a child had been building. I left it where it was, drove through quiet neighborhoods toward St. Anthony's, past Carmela's without slowing. It was just a building now, brick and glass and a red awning. I didn't need to see what was inside anymore. 6 minutes ahead, 60 children, 4 turkeys, and a family I'd chosen, who'd chosen me back. I pressed the gas and left everything else behind. The dining hall at St. Anthony's smelled like roasted turkey and warm bread when I arrived at 10:15. I'd left everything else behind on that drive: the empty house, the silent phone, the restaurant I'd passed without slowing. All of it stayed in the rearview mirror where it belonged. Inside, long banquet tables draped in white linen stretched the length of the hall. Strings of golden lights hung from the rafters, casting everything in soft amber. Lorraine stood near the kitchen door, tying napkins around the necks of squirming toddlers. She looked up as I walked in and smiled. No words necessary. We'd been doing this long enough that we didn't need them. I grabbed folding chairs from the storage closet and started setting them around the tables. Simple work. The kind where your hands know what to do and your mind can settle into the rhythm of it. By noon, the hall was packed with 60 children, some I recognized from my Thursday blueprint lessons. Some toddlers shrieking with joy between the tables, a few teenagers pretending to look bored until the food came out. Carol and her kitchen team brought out 4 golden turkeys on massive platters, mountains of mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, dinner rolls warm enough to melt butter on contact. Cranberry sauce an older kid had made from scratch, proud of every tart spoonful. Finn sat to my left, wearing a button-down shirt slightly too big for him, sleeves rolled to his elbows. He'd insisted on looking professional for his turkey carving debut. A boy across the table, maybe 5 years old, stared at me with wide eyes and whispered to Finn, "Who's that?" Finn sat up straighter. "That's my grandpa." "What does he do?" "He builds the big bridges," Finn said, like he was explaining something vitally important. "The ones that never fall down." I lowered my head and pretended to be very interested in buttering my dinner roll. Something had caught in my throat. When a child tells another child that you build bridges that never fall down, they aren't talking about steel and concrete. They're talking about showing up every Thursday, about admitting when you don't know something and learning it together, about being the kind of steady presence that doesn't collapse when the weight gets heavy. After dessert, Finn tugged my sleeve. "Grandpa, can I carve a piece of turkey for you?" I slid my plate closer. He stood, took the carving knife Carol had taught him to hold safely, and cut slowly, tongue poking out in concentration. The slice came out uneven and a little ragged, but he gave it everything he had. I picked up my fork, tasted it, and said, "That's the best piece of turkey on this entire table." His smile could have lit the whole room. My eyes drifted to the empty chair on my right. No biological son sitting there. Never would be again. But for the first time in months, that empty chair brought no pain. If you stop waiting for someone to fill it, it's just wood and air. Lorraine appeared at my elbow, handed me a fresh coffee. "Good day," she said quietly. "Good day," I agreed. Family isn't always the place where you were born. Family is the place where someone saves a chair for you. And today, the person saving mine was a 9-year-old boy who can't carve a turkey completely straight, but tells other children that I build bridges that never fall down. I don't think a man like me could ever ask for anything more than that. And to you listening to my story, remember this family isn't always the people who share your blood. For years, I measured my worth by whether my son was proud of me. I let his words about my flannel shirts, my truck, my simple life make me feel small. Don't make my mistake. Don't wait for someone else to validate your value. I spent 65 years building bridges that would stand for generations, but I almost forgot to build a foundation for myself. This isn't just another one of those dad's revenge stories where everything ends perfectly tied up. Family justice doesn't always mean confrontation at a restaurant or proving someone wrong with receipts. Sometimes the truest form of family justice is walking away and choosing a better table. I believe God put Finn and those children in my path for a reason to show me that being a grandfather isn't about genetics. It's about showing up every Thursday with patience and kindness. The revenge, if you can call it that, was finding peace. If this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever had to choose between family you're born into and family you find your stories matter? And if you want more stories like this, subscribe to Wise Revenge. These dad's revenge stories aren't about payback. They're about finding yourself. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know. One final reminder, some details in this story have been fictionalized to bring the lesson to life, but the message about choosing your own family and finding peace is real.